I'll hand over to you, Rory, just to go over some of the solutions.
Sure. Yeah, so we're looking at three main review solutions today: ftrack Review, ftrack Studio, and cineSync. So ftrack Studio is the broader platform that ftrack has built to track everything on a show from beginning to end, which includes time management, it includes asset management, it includes tasks, and of course the review component as well. And we have ftrack Review, which is essentially a cut down version that concentrates on review only, and as a fully web-based review platform. And then cineSync, which is our application-based review platform for reviewing larger, high-quality media in a really secure environment. So we'll talk about how those three work together, and also how they apply in different workflows, and why you would choose one for a specific need.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add, ftrack Review can also be seen as the entry-level version into Studio, right? So if you want to start with the review component, that's fine, and you will be able to scale that up, the use of it, if you need asset management, for example, in ftrack Studio. Great. Anything else to add there, Rory? Or should we just go into
continue.
Yeah, great. So let's talk about some of the terminology then, our different types of users. So there are basically two different types of participants. First one in the list you can see here on this slide is about everyone that's in an asynchronous review, which can basically just be with someone receiving a link to a review session and adding their feedback to it. There can also be synced participants, which the main difference is just that more than one is watching the review or actually participating in the review, and they can see what is happening live in that review.
Like a fully interactive review. So all sides can control the review, and they can all see what each other's doing.
Yeah. We'll certainly look into that in a few minutes during the demos and show you what that is. Also there are collaborators, external collaborators, those that are invited to review sessions, and what's most important to mention when talking about external collaborators is that those don't consume a seat in ftrack. They are free, basically. So you can generally you can invite as many as you need, and you don't need to pay for any of those. There are also, of course, the team members of the in ftrack that are consuming seats. A team member could be any sort of creative person, like an artist or someone actually, let's say, working in Photoshop or in Maya, for example. And they have user accounts associated with their name. So those are the different types of users we will be talking about today, and so it's good to have that in as a background going forward. So also there are, of course, a number of different types of reviews, and here we have tried to split them into, or you can actually see them as belonging to different categories. There are internal reviews, of course, within a facility. There are also internal reviews that can exist across two or more offices within also of the same facility, but those two can represent different types of uses, basically, of the internal review tools. We will also look into that in a few minutes, what the difference is between those categories, because the external reviews is a bit different. They are mostly used with it says supervisor reviews, for example, or client reviews with someone sitting somewhere else. It could be somewhere else in the world. It could be it could be actually next to you, but it actually yeah, it's probably better to look into the main differences in a short while. So would you like to say something about the
I was just going to say, Mattias, that yeah, and in addition to those the different types of review, it's also the intention can be quite different. So sometimes you'd be just reviewing work in progress internally and discussing what next steps are, or you could be presenting a final version to a client or to a director and getting sign off. So it can change the dynamic of the review quite a lot, and so the ways that you want to do it and the tools that you want to use can vary as a result. So within those different types of reviews and the different formats, ease of access might be a primary concern. So this is for people who are maybe less technical, who are outside of the facility, and who want to be able to access the material in a simple fashion. But you also have security. So how do you share these files without them leaking out into the wild? If you're working on Star Wars, you don't want to have reviews with external parties if that means that the files could then be seen by someone who's not authorized. How do you share files externally and maintain the quality? Be able to still play 4K video and have it play back frame accurately and smoothly, so that you don't have the pitfalls of a screen sharing situation. And then the final thing is interactivity. So you can sit and watch a presentation, but sometimes being able to ask a question and being able to actually poke something and say, I want to stop here and look at this, that can be the big difference between a successful review and one in which questions don't get answered. So all of these factors really contribute to making a review successful, and so we're going to show you the different ways that comes about.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thanks, Rory. So yeah, again, there are a number of types of reviews. We will take a look at them in just a short while and point at what the differences are, of course, during these demos. So yes, as Rory said, also there are internal reviews. Our products can be used for internal reviews, and the how to use them differs, of course, from case to case. But the main types are within the one facility or across different locations. Yes, what was just covered. So reviews can be asynchronous. It could be, let's say, someone or a team going into a theater, looking at a big screen, a supervisor showing off or reviewing it live in front of all the team members, and also adding feedback, also showing on the screen, pointing at what should be changed and so on. That's an asynchronous review, right? And there are also synchronized reviews, which are interactive. Rory mentioned it quickly, but those are happening live, basically. When, let's say that when a supervisor, for example, or someone reviewing is adding or annotating on the screen, for example, then that annotation will also show up on the participants' screens, basically. All of this is happening at the same time.
Yeah, and one of the biggest changes in the last 6 months with COVID has been the way the internal reviews are run, because there are so few chances now to get all those people in a room, and particularly animation companies. You know, we are talking to animation companies that used to have 100, 200 people would be in a theater together, and now they need to find ways to be able to review that stuff still together and watching it all live, but from home or from multiple offices, because they can no longer be in the same theater.
Yeah, exactly. And you did you cover that about that this is often a requirement, not during the COVID times, of course, but it's often a requirement that you can do synchronized interactive reviews, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So next one, a little bit more about what makes it unique, basically. So within a facility, it's often so that everyone has access to the media locally, or through a network drive at least, and across offices there's often media mirrored, so file transfers aren't required in that sense. But I'm not sure if you would like to chip in here,
Yeah, sure.
Rory, about the...
Yeah, so there is obviously facilities where and it can happen from show to show. The requirements are that they are completely disconnected from the internet. So a facility is essentially air gapped. So the media is local within the facility, but people need to be able to share that externally. And even if you have two facilities that have mirrored file systems and they both have the files at both ends, how do you communicate between both? So we've built cineSync in such a way that we're able to do a synchronized review between two locations without transferring any media at all, but allowing still to have that fully interactive review. And that's something we've spent quite a bit of time on perfecting. So it's still an internal review in the sense that it's within the one facility, but it is between two air-gapped buildings.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take a look at a couple of demos to better understand what we have been talking about so far. So we'll start by looking at a clip from ftrack Studio, and it will show us different ways of opening the review player. Here we're looking at a quick review, or using the quick review option by just clicking the thumbnail that we have over on the left-hand side here. Probably confusing with two cursors here on the screen, but sorry about that. So what we will do here now is that we will select a few items, create a list from those, or actually we can take a look at the web player directly, but let's see here. On the left-hand side, sorry, we have the different lists, and the review player can be opened from a list as an option to just open single items. So you can easily create like lists of items that you want to go over or go through on a review session. Here we're looking at the web player, the internal review player, which primarily has its player at the top, a feedback pane on the right-hand side. Here we're also selecting some items to play in a sequence, so you can get the full context, basically how that will look like. We also have a compare mode, which lets you watch two clips next to each other, so you can easily see changes between versions of the same asset. And the annotation tools, let's see here, there we are. The annotation tools can be used to annotate or draw directly on screen, and also of course add written feedback to it. So as soon as you click post, that will be added, and the annotation will be attached to that note. A quick look at the synchronous features. Here we are starting the synced session in one browser, and in the other browser we are just joining the session, right? So here we have two different participants, or two participants in this session, and as you can see here right now, if we try the arrow tool, you can see that when we have added this arrow on the synced session, as you can see there, it mirrors directly over to the other participant. That was a quick look at the ftrack Studio. Oh, sorry, the ftrack Studio functionality. So take a look at cineSync next, and I'll let you talk about that, Rory.
Thanks, Mattias. Yeah, so this is looking at cineSync, starting a cineSync session, and this is just looking at how cineSync works within a normal review. So the top left is the owner of the review. So they've started the session with their username and password. And then the bottom right is a guest in the session. So just imagine that the owner is in America and the guest is in Europe. And they're logging into the same session using a session key, which is just an alphanumeric string that allows them to join the same session and to identify each other. So the owner is going to drop the files into the review. Because this is an internal review, they both have access to the same files. So it all syncs up automatically. And similar to ftrack review, we can annotate, we can draw circles, we can draw arrows. Anything that anyone does on one screen is mirrored on the other. If we change movies, it changes for everyone. And if anyone moves around in the review, it's all frame accurate. Basically, the guarantee is that whatever you see, everyone else will see it at the same time. And it takes all the kind of guesswork out of reviews where you might send someone a file and you hope that they know what you're talking about. With cineSync and with ftrack review, you can show them exactly what you mean and you can answer questions in context. Thanks, Mattias.
Yes, thanks, Rory. So that was about the internal review functionality that we provide in ftrack Studio and cineSync, and I also have ftrack review. Sorry. So let's take a look at the external reviews and how it can be used with like a client or an external user of some type. So external reviews could be with other facilities working on the same projects, of course. That needs that needs a way basically to review each other's work or something like that. It could be a supervisor review, just simply a supervisor going through the assets that have been produced during the day or the week or so since last time. Or it could, of course, also then be client reviews, someone externally that hasn't anything to do with the company using ftrack as a primary tool, so to speak. But it's more about clients being invited to, or someone externally being invited to the ftrack instance. So external reviews can also be asynchronous, of course, but also then the chance of miscommunication can be much higher. Would you like to add anything here, Rory, before I continue?
Yeah, well, it's similar to what I was saying before, that if you can send someone notes and you can never quite be sure that they understand what it is that you're talking about, because if they could be looking at the wrong version and you won't know. They could have misunderstood the question that you've asked them. Whereas if you're in an interactive synchronized review, because you're looking at it in context, you're both looking at the same thing, you can literally just point to the screen as if you're in the same room and say, is this what you mean? And so it really does bypass a lot of the misunderstandings that can come about through miscommunications, time delays, trying to get decisions made, and you're waiting for someone to come back with something. If you're in a live meeting, you get a decision there and then. So it really can speed up that process and remove the misunderstandings.
Yeah, of course, and things like that is very important, of course, to always be at the same page, on the same page, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Next up, a little bit more about external reviews and what makes them unique, basically. So external reviews can of course mean substantial security challenges. I know this is Rory's area of expertise rather than mine, but yeah, it's would you like to continue here, Rory, or what do you think?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So this is really when you're in the situation, and this happens a lot on major films or commercials. The directors aren't in the facility; they're going to be somewhere else. They might be at their house. They might be at another studio. They might have moved on to the next project, and they're just filing something from a previous commercial, for instance. So you need to be able to share things with them in a way that's secure, but still allow them to be able to make judgments around the quality of the content. So you don't want to just send them a proxy and try and get them to judge it on a 720p proxy. You want them to see the full final original media But if you do that, you're sending that final full-res original media out of your facility, out of your air-gap facility, and onto a machine that you can't control, and that you can't, you can't enforce security restrictions on. So, how do you manage that process? And if you are sending it to an external machine, how do you ensure that that file doesn't then get out into the wild? So that's something we can have a look at over the next few slides. But this is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of doing reviews, because this process is important to ensure the security, but also to ensure that the everyone who participates in it is able to participate, and that the technical requirements aren't so onerous that it blocks people from being able to be involved. So that's the balance that we're always trying to find.
Yeah, exactly. So external reviews in action. Let's start looking at how that looks in ftrack Studio again. And we're looking at animation tasks here. As you could see, we filtered on the right-hand side. We can select a few assets from this project and create a client review session. You can see that on the left-hand side, but we have opened the client reviews category. If I just pause here a little bit, just to talk about what we have here. So all the assets you can see here in the middle of the screen were those we selected. We gave it a new name, an animation review in this case, because we filtered on animation assets, right? On the right-hand side, we have a few settings. I mean, if you want to allow downloading of the media that the participants are watching or reviewing, you can do that. You can control if notifications should be sent to the collaborators, but also you can add passphrase protection for added security. So it's not just a matter of accessing a link. You also need to enter a passphrase. You can control when a review session will be open or accessible at all, because if you're outside of the dates here, outside of this date span, then you won't even be able to load the session. So let's see if I can continue here in this clip. It's just a matter of adding the collaborators, enter their email and name here, and those are the external collaborators that don't consume a seat that we talked about earlier, and those are free of charge. Just a matter of clicking send invites, and everyone will receive a link, an email with a link like this email that we have a screenshot over here, and you're basically taken into something looks like this. It's very similar to the internal tool you saw before, but we have basically removed all the internal information you can see on the right-hand side. You instead just have a feedback pane, just a way to add feedback or read feedback, and but I mean the tools in general are very similar. You can play assets or versions in sequence. You can annotate directly on screen and add that to the feedback, and of course also comparing notes. Comparing versions. Here's the synced functionality again in the external review tool. Again, very similar, with one working as the main reviewer or like the supervisor, and one working as the participant in the session, or anyone could actually be anyone sitting anywhere watching the synced review in ftrack Studio. And of course, if we haven't said it before, this could be on two completely different places, physical places, right? So just to say something about what you can see on the right-hand side as well, you have a way to see the status of each collaborator. So all those that have a green badge on them, then badge icon, then they are active in the session right now. And so it's easy to see if everyone's online, essentially. So we also have some, we have functionality to transfer feedback from review sessions, because I mean, the review sessions they should be seen as isolated spaces basically for the feedback. So those are kept separated from the rest of the ftrack instance. So you basically need to transfer feedback from a review session back into ftrack, and I mean, to make it appear for artists or other types of users inside your ftrack instance, or the rest of your team members. Of course, you can see it as, of course, as well. So it can look like this one that we will be looking at right now. You can just scroll through all the feedback in this screen to see what has been added to the review session. But you can also, if you think that you would like to replace specific feedback, then you can do that as well. If you just don't want to let the rest of the team know what the client has added, for example, it could be details of anything, and then you can remove that from here and make sure that doesn't get through to the team. And here is how it looks in the interface. If you're just clicking an asset version, you can also see that the specific feedback that comes from the client has a feedback banner added onto it, which makes it very clear that this is external feedback coming from like a client. That was the functionality in ftrack Studio. I'll hand it over to you, Rory, to talk a little bit about the functionality in cineSync.
Sorry, if we could just pause that for a sec. I just wanted to quickly make a distinction, or explain the distinction between ftrack Review and cineSync and the way that they work. So what we're seeing with Mattias is a fully web-based review where the guest clicks a link, it loads it in their preferred browser automatically, and it pulls all the files in from a cloud-hosted source, from ftrack. So that's the simplest way of getting someone into a review, and the simplest way of getting someone into a synchronized review, because they don't have to set anything up. There's nothing to install, and there's no technical overhead at all. It just works. And being a synchronized review, once they're in sync, they can pretty much sit back and they can watch a presentation, and it just all works. And for many situations, that works well. In some situations, however, you need to be able to play files that can't be supported in a browser, or that are too big to be able to play back successfully in a browser. And what cineSync does is it allows you to play back local files and synchronize those. So if we're looking at 4K media and we're playing back on a local machine, then we can play that back using local machine resources, local graphics cards, and we can ensure that we're getting absolute frame accurate playback. And cineSync will synchronize multiple copies of that media in multiple locations around the world, and make sure they're all fully in sync, but it does it without any loss of quality in the playback. So the challenge is getting the files to each location to make that work. And one of the ways that we do that is we leverage the capability of ftrack to get the files to everyone. So if you hit play again, we'll run through. So we're looking here at a cineSync session, 2 participants, the host on the top and the guest on the bottom in different places. And we're going to log into our ftrack instance. So this is built directly into cineSync. There's nothing to install. It comes as part of the cineSync package. And from within here, we can view all the things in ftrack that are valid for review. So we can see all of our projects. We can open a project and we can see within that our versions, and we can also see reviews and lists, which are basically containers for versions. And any version we can look at and we can drill down into. We can see previous notes that have been made on that version. We can see any previous save frames that have been made in previous reviews. And we can add any of those versions to the review. Now, in this case, those files are being pulled down from the ftrack cloud instance, and they're being pulled into our local storage. So these are now local files, and they can be proxies, which come down quickly, or they can be high resolution files, which will play back at full speed. And then we can have our normal cineSync review. So similar tools to what you've seen before. We can draw on the screen, we can make notes, we can make text notes, and all of these things are synchronized and interactive. At the end of the review, once all those notes have been made, we go back to our integrations menu, and we can export those back to Shotgun, to ftrack. So in similar to how Mattias showed you before, we have a preview window that allows us to publish these. And before we publish, we can choose to edit the note. We can add additional notes. If there are frames that we didn't mean to mark up, we can remove them. And we can choose to either publish these as a new note, or we can merge them with existing notes. So if we've made notes in ftrack previously, we can choose to merge it. But in this case, we're going to publish as a new note. And when we, I should say also, we can also change the approval status. So if it has been changed from a work in progress to approved during that meeting, we can flag that, and that flag will also go through to ftrack. When we hit publish, it all flows through to ftrack directly, and all the notes that we've made are now recorded correctly against the correct version in ftrack. So all of the notes we've made in cineSync are now recorded in that one central repository, and you can see if we open the file in ftrack, it's all there. So that's how that works. It's very simple from the guest point of view, because they don't need to know how any of that works. Basically, they launch cineSync, the files come into the session, and it all happens fairly automatically. So to skip to the next slide, the challenge with that, of course, is that normally if you send someone a file, then they have a file in their file system, which means you now have a file that is outside of your control. So how do we manage that process? And how do we ensure that the files are both locked down during the review, and also that we can kind of retain control of them again after the review is finished? So, and doing all that while guaranteeing performance. So on the next slide, we've got another little run through of how we manage that in terms of the ftrack integration. So in this case, within that review that we just saw, we had set this up that even though they're pulling the files to, even though the guest's pulling the files to their local file system, they're doing it in such a way that the files are encrypted on the target disk for the guest, which means that if they were to look in their file system and find that file locally, they would actually see that the file is both, it doesn't have a file name that's readable, so you can't really tell what it is. And if you tried to play it, you can see here, it's basically an alphanumeric string. If you try to play that file in anything other than a cineSync session, and in fact, if you try and play it in anything other than a cineSync session that's with the person that originated the file, it will just say it's an invalid file, because it's a 256-bit encrypted file that's unusable for anything. But within the cineSync session, when the guest's in the review with the owner of that file, then it will actually play. So basically, the file is decrypted into memory during the review. It'll play in cineSync. And it means that during the review we can interact with it, and we can do what we're normally doing. And this, this is full resolution media. This is final final work product, but we're sharing that with the external guest. However, when the guest leaves the review, the files are wiped automatically from their system, because that's a setting we have in this integration. So as the guest goes, you'll see those files removed from the file system. And in this case, you'll see half of them go, and then when the owner leaves, they'll go from the owner's one as well. We're seeing both sides of this interaction in this demonstration. But yeah, it means that the files at the end of the review are cleaned up and taken away. So we've had a fully synchronized session playing back 4K full res media at full speed with no delays that you would normally see with screen sharing or other applications. But at the end of the review, the files are being encrypted the entire time, and they're deleted off the file system at the end. So you don't have any chance of exposure. The guest doesn't have to do anything at all. They can't break the process. But at the same time, the guest doesn't need to know what's happening. As far as they're concerned, again, the files are turning up automatically. They play nicely. And then at the end of the review, they're gone. And in fact, we also have an app with cineSync that allows you to pull those files to an iPhone. And the fact that the files are cleaned off at the end means that you don't have an iPhone that's full of encrypted media that they can't do anything with. It just cleans itself up as it goes. So it's security, accessibility, ease of use are all these things that we're bringing together and using the kind of the ftrack ecosystem to make that work. And that's really what the whole balance is as we go through. How do we manage those things? And as a result, how do you choose which platform you're going to use to make this work? And I think, as we've seen on the way through here, you've got for ftrack review, you can do really quick, light reviews. It's easy to share. You can exchange a lot of information in those reviews, and you can do it with a very light touch with people who aren't necessarily very technical. In ftrack Studio, you can retain a huge wealth of information and capture all of the notes that you're making internally. And with cineSync, you can review large files, original media, maybe even frame sequences or file sequences, or other tools that you can't use in a web player that are available in cineSync, and you can do that in such a way that you have all of that ability, but without any exposure in security. So that's in the end why we have the different tools that we have. I think I don't know if Mattias has anything else to add at this point, but we certainly open for questions and further discussion about how all that goes together. So I'm not sure how many questions that we have.
There are a number of questions. Thanks so much, Rory.
Yes, there are indeed. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
A bunch of good questions, and even if many has to do with internal review sessions and how to organize email addresses and so on. But should we can start with the with one of the questions from the beginning of the session, with the first review session. If that was using just a basic ftrack install with no plugins and just video file stored on the cloud, and yes, that was the case. We have we were using in that demo, we were using just a vanilla workspace of ftrack, and yeah, what's included out of the box, what we provide out of the box, basically. So do you have any other good question, Rory, or should we should probably actually cover that with the emails, actually, because there are a few questions related to that, how to handle email addresses, and by saying that, I mean on the right hand side in an ftrack review session, in a client review session, when you invite your external collaborators, you add you enter the name and the email address, right, to each participant. And the way I would have solved that right now would be to actually set up a session with a list of email addresses that you frequently send review sessions to, and just clone that session. That would be the easiest way to get around that with not entering them one by one each time. Do you have any cineSync?
Yeah, so there was a question here about transferring files for a cineSync session, and I guess that's a question about, because we showed how we do it with ftrack, but if you're not using ftrack, or if in that situation that's not how you're working, we do integrate with other transfer tools. We integrate with other platforms. And sometimes we have customers who have their own transfer systems. So, and similar to the internal facility reviews, they might have their own kind of lockdown way of transferring things, and that might be using Aspera or Signient or tools like that. We also have inbuilt SFTP client, and the SFTP client allows us to still transfer files seamlessly to the guest. They're still encrypted. They're encrypted on the SFTP, and they're encrypted when they arrive at the guest's end. So there are a number of options, but basically once the files are at each end, we can just synchronize them together within the review. So regardless of whether you send them through tools that we're integrated with or through your own file transfer, we'll just hook them together when they turn up. And make that process simple.
Yes. Perfect. Thanks, Rory. So I have another question here, which I've actually heard about before. That I do think that we have a feature request for already, and that's about organizing client review sessions into subfolders on the left-hand side. And that is something that is not possible right now. It is definitely something that I've heard about before, as I said. So I'll take a look at that and see if we can get a status on that feature request, where that is, if it's in the backlog or if it's actually on the roadmap. So I'll need to get back to you about that.
And the next question, Mattias, is about having groups for collaborators. So being able to invite, if you're inviting the same group of 10 people each time, is there a quick way of doing that?
Yeah, and I mean that's related to what I said before. Instead of typing it in one by one, I would have created like a template review session and added all my collaborators to that session and just cloned that one. Because when you clone a session, everything except the media, of course, added to that session will be copied over basically to that session,
right?
And all the collaborators will follow.
Yeah, I've also seen design internally for a feature that allows you to create groups for collaborators. So I know that's on a roadmap. It's not something that's available yet, but it's definitely something we've thought about and is coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a bunch of good questions. Do you have anything else, Rory? Or I think
there was one final question here I've got, which is about tagging people in a review. So being able to call out a specific person to call attention to a particular note that relates to an individual. So again, that's something that we're looking at in terms of the whole review workflow and how we manage the flow of information from reviews. It's definitely something we've been asked about before, and it's something that we were looking to implement in a next iteration. So it's definitely, again, it's on the list. Not there yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah, I would actually also extend that to say that we will be looking at the notification workflows in general, right? I've heard about that. So it's just not only about the managing of review notifications. It's also in a wider context. But yeah, in general, yes. It's something that we will be looking at. So it's a very good question.
Yeah, so that can be whether you're tagging someone or whether you're sort of at mentioning them, in a Slack style notification. I think that we're very open to all of those processes, and we really want to be able to. In the end, I think that the main aim with the ftrack ecosystem is to be able to bring all these tools together and to be able to make communication really easy no matter where you are. So if you're in the same facility, you can be able to just send a note to someone through ftrack and say, have a look at this. If you're on the other side of the world, you can send a link to someone and drop into a review with them really easily. So all of these tools for notifying, for tagging, for adding people to reviews are things that we're looking to simplify and to grow as we go. And we're going to see that all coming together really soon. And there's a question which has just come through about a mobile app. So we have apps for cineSync, and that works fully within the integrator with ftrack right now. They're currently the ftrack app is in development. So we have an app that has some basic functionality, and we know that needs to be expanded. So that's something I think that we'll be focusing on over the next while, and that's actually something that that our team here in Adelaide has been starting to design, and we're working with the team in Sweden to map that out. So that's on the roadmap. That's going to take a little bit longer. It's a bigger process, and it's something that we're going to spend a bit of time really getting right. But we want to make sure that not just for review, but for being able to check statuses in ftrack and to be able to check notes and tasks, that we have a simple app that allows us to be able to do that. So I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Yeah, there were a good bunch of questions there. Thank you so much for sending them over to us during this webinar. And we'll hand over back to Vitaly there.
No, thank you guys. Fantastic presentation. Lots of takeaways for everyone. For all the questions that we didn't have time to answer, we will address in an email. So yeah, do not worry about that. We have a few more webinars coming up. So guys, please go to ftrack.com / always want to do that / webinars. You know, and obviously to help us increase the value of future webinars, we're going to send around a mini survey. Please share your thoughts with us. Tell us what you like to hear about more in the future. And from the whole ftrack team and Rory and cineSync and everyone, we appreciate you spending your time with us, and I hope you all took away something from the session. Thank you so much for attending.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.